Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this additional meeting of the Oakview and Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Paul Osborne and I'm the chairman of the committee. This meeting is being held remotely and will be live streamed via YouTube, and a recording of it will be available afterwards on the RDC website. Before I continue with this meeting, given the news prior to the weekend of the sad passing of His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, I feel it would be appropriate, as this is the first meeting since then, that we hold a minute's silence. So, Lisa, if you could count us in. If members wish to turn the cameras off or their microphones off, it's entirely up to you. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, Chairman. 3, 2, 1. That's your minute, Chairman.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody. I will say I never actually met Prince Philip, but I did have tea in his back garden a few years ago, and he was there. So that's as close as I can get. Right, into the meeting proper. Councillors and officers are reminded to put their mobile phones on the silent. If you have one nearby, and mute the microphones when not speaking. This will reduce feedback and background noise and saves bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. If you're a member of the committee, please leave your camera on. I'll first do a roll call to check the committee members who are expected to attend are present. As I say your name, please turn on your microphone and confirm you are connected. Councillor John Barnes.
Present, Chairman. Can I say you're not terribly audible at the moment?
Okay. Councillor Jimmy Carroll.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Charlie Clark.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Vicky Cook.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Cortell.
Present.
Councillor Brian Drayson, Chairman of Council.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Deirdre Earl Williams.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Errington.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Polly Gray.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Madeley. Thank you. Councillor Carl Maynard.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Martin Mooney.
Present.
Thank you. Cabinet members here have been invited by myself this evening as is part of their portfolio potentially. Councillor Christine Bayliss.
Present.
And Councillor Kevin Dixon.
Present.
Thank you. Other members are here. I've got here Lisa. Lisa, you'll read out names of attending members. If you're here, then do you need to say so? If you don't read your name out, just put your name in the chat to make sure you're here. Lisa.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've noted that Councillor Mrs Barnes is present also. Councillor Harmer, Councillor Mear, Councillor Norton and Councillor Thomas.
Okay, thank you. As I said, if anyone else is here who's not been listed, then just put your name in the chat. Officers joining us this evening are, I see Councillor Kirby Green's present as well. Thank you. Malcolm Johnson, Chief Executive. Ben Hook, Head of Service Acquisitions, Transformation Regeneration. Cheryl Paul, Major Projects Manager. And did I see Robin Bernard? Yeah, I've got Robin's machine down there. He's got a little picture of his dog. So I think Robin's here as well. And today, Lisa, as opposed to Louise, is doing this meeting, giving Lisa a bit of time off. Members of the committee will be making decisions today by named vote. Lisa will call out each member in turn. They will either answer for, against, or abstain. Members, please remember to turn on your microphone again at this point and turn off after voting. Those members who wish to speak, please indicate by typing your surname only into the chat facility. Please be aware there'll be a time delay of 5 seconds whilst a member appears on screen. Item 1, apologies and substitution. I don't believe there are any. Is that correct, Lisa?
That's correct, Chairman. All present.
Thank you. Disclosure of interest, I would probably assume there's none. I'll be right. I would hope it'd be all right.
Yes.
Councillor Cortell.
Yes, please, Chairman.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't have my mic on. A disclosure of interest as a member of BEG, the Bexhill Environmental Group.
Right, I'm not really sure where that would have a...
There's a section on climate change. There's a report on climate change on the agenda.
Okay. Councillor Maynard.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I mean, I'd certainly like to declare an interest as a sitting East Sussex County Councillor seeking re-election, because I think it's really important that we do draw attention to the fact that we are in the pre-election period. And for that reason, I'll declare an interest as obviously currently executive member in terms of that role that I currently hold within East Sussex County Council. But furthermore, if you'll allow me, Chairman, I'd like to take this opportunity to say that I don't think it was appropriate to hold this meeting during the pre-election period, because I think there'll be a number of us who are either sitting, well, not sitting, but who are county council candidates for the coming elections, or indeed town council candidates for the coming elections, that will feel somewhat inhibited from speaking out or relating to political statements. But furthermore, I'll go one step further and say that given the very sad passing of the Duke of Edinburgh, and whilst I understand we are allowed to hold public meetings today, we're of course not allowed to campaign until tomorrow. As far as I'm concerned, quite clearly we will be also celebrating the life of the Duke of Edinburgh next Saturday. But at this particular point, I think it would be highly inappropriate for anybody to make any political points at this evening's meeting. This evening's meeting should be, and I'm not taking anybody to suck heads here, this evening's meeting should be about information gathering, and you know, given the circumstances, as I say, I would have preferred a postponement of this meeting, although we obviously wanted to see this meeting take place, but I don't think it's the appropriate time. But for that reason, certainly, and for any reason of being accused of any political statement, I will certainly be advising members of our group not to participate in any votes this evening either, because anything that could be construed as being party political, or indeed political in any sense, given the passing of the Duke of Edinburgh, I think would be extremely ill-advised and inappropriate. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Well, Lisa has given me a list of current members of East Sussex who are here this evening, who are Councillors Clark, Earl Williams and Councillor Maynard, and current non-members who are seeking election to East Sussex. Well, Councillor Field is already a member, I understand. But non-members are Councillor Bayliss and Kirby Green, who are seeking election, and Councillor Field, Maynard, Earl Williams and Clark are seeking re-election.
You probably need to know, Chairman, that I'm a member of the County Council, but I'm not seeking re-election.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you. the two members who are standing for the town council are in anyway. so there we are. So yeah, I think it's worth saying that this, yeah, we're here this evening. It's a funny one, if you like. The decision to sort of fund the works looking into, you know, the technical works and the architects and everything else has been passed already at Cabinet and full council. Subject to, I understand, Bennett, tell me if I'm wrong, subject to this meeting taking place and anything coming out of this meeting that may change. So, you know, it's sort of I could say, you know, I'm not being critical of anyone, but had this information been made before the Cabinet and council meeting, then we may not have been required to be sat here this evening getting information. I just say that, not being critical, but that's the position. So there we are. We've got 100 and some odd pages of stuff which we've read through and looked through. So I think now it's probably the best thing is to ask Ben to present said report. Ben.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, just to sort of introduce as well, for those who've not met her, Cheryl Paul, who's the project manager for this project. I may be calling upon her for some of the more detailed information questions that may come up as part of this process. Just to say, really, this whole project started off with one simple question, which is, what is the future of the town hall building? Given the sort of ever increasing cost just to keep the existing building compliant with modern workspace regulations, significant and expensive works to the building will continue to be required year on year on year. In the last financial year alone, we've replaced over 70 internal doors and the entire fire alarm system just to meet statutory compliance for fire protection. These works combined have cost almost £100,000. So in addition to that, a recent asbestos survey has identified further works that are going to be necessary to ensure the long-term safety of town hall users. And to be honest with you, the sudden appearance of buckets in various parts of the main building during rainy spells is, relatively unsurprising for anybody who works in the town hall. In addition to this, a full replacement of the mechanical and electrical systems are going to be required. They're both outdated and expensive to run, and this will be needed in the next 5 to 10 years and could cost well into the 7 figures with the extent of the likely works that are needed. Simply put, doing nothing in regards to the town hall is not really an option because significant money will be spent on it regardless, and just to keep it functioning as a workspace into the future. So officers undertook a series of options which were explored as part of these early discussions, and to be honest with you, those included a potential relocation to a different building as an option. But it was viewed at the time that the sort of potential economic loss to Bexhill Town Centre, removing 250 employees from that area was considered to be too great, and should be only really considered as an option of last resort. What we've done is put together a pretty comprehensive report. A point taken, Chairman, about this information not being released as part of the Cabinet report, and I've taken that on board, and I think what we tried to do was try to balance that need to ensure that members had enough information to make a decision to move us on to the next phase, whilst not sort of overburdening in terms of the massive information that we had available to us at the time. I think maybe we found that balance wrong, and we'll look to be a bit more open with the information we have available into the future. So that's a point taken. In terms of the future of the site, we sort of had 4 high-level options. These options were appraised at Appendix B. You probably recognise this. This was already part of the original Cabinet paper. What we've done is in addition to that, we've added in Appendix C, which gives some high-level costings and income generation potential for these options. Appendices D to G represent all of the feasibility work undertaken to date on option 4, which is the sort of more wholesale redevelopment of the town hall site, and you know, sort of to create that sort of new office space. Appendix D in particular is the key concept report, which was pulled together by our ex-architects who are located in Rye and have done much of the work out at Rock Channel. They did the concept study for us. They looked at all the various options, the capacity of the site, the need to generate an income to cover the costs of building anything that we wish to build, and the desire to include as much residential as we could into that as well. So really, I mean, I sort of feel that the report covers most of the bases, and I think anything else I can say over and above that will just be going over old ground. So I'm happy to really sort of sit back and take questions from members, and Cheryl and I will do our best to address them as and when they come up.
Okie dokie, thank you. Well, members, over to you. What we got here? Councillor Cortels first.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was muted. I've got a number of questions, but first of all, I'd like to say that there are some very positive things in this report. The improvement in office facilities is excellent. The construction of flats in a town centre location is much needed, and the environmental improvements that are proposed are very welcome. I do have a number of concerns, and if I could go through these one at a time. First of all, there's been a staff survey in May 2020, almost a year ago, and it indicated at the time that the great majority of employees were happy working from home a large proportion of the time. But at the time, working from home was a novelty. Wouldn't it be desirable to undertake an immediate staff survey before any further costly work is commissioned? I could pause while Ben answers that, or possibly Councillor Bates.
Happy to address that one straight off the bat there, if you're happy for me to do so, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, in terms of progressing this work, I mean, I don't see the immediate relevance of what people are thinking right now in terms of what we provide for staff coming back in the immediate future. Absolutely, and we will be undertaking further staff surveys to ensure that our plans for the immediate return to the office in a post-COVID environment meet, you know, the working needs of the staff. I think what we're looking at doing is this work will take a period of years in which we will have the opportunity to do a culture shift as well, if there's one required. But I think based on we've done the first survey in May, as you point out. We have done a subsequent survey of staff, and it showed around about the same, if not a little bit of an increase in the desire to continue working from home, albeit in a part and part manner. So I think where most people are falling is sort of in the sort of 2 to 3 days from home, 2 to 3 days from the office sort of approach. Some more to the extremes of 4 and 1 and 5 and 0. So I think the anticipation is that won't change significantly in the intervening years, and is more pertinent to the immediate return to the office rather than the long-term future of the staff accommodation.
Thank you very much. My next question, Chair, concerns parking spaces and the proportion of parking spaces to the number of people on the site. My understanding, Mr. Hook, is that there'll be parking for 85 cars 20 at the front, 50 at the rear, and 15 in the overflow car park. Now, if I understand the report correctly, the architect's brief in June 2020 indicated that there was space, that he was asked to produce, or they were asked to produce enough space, working space for 150 full-time employees. Now, that is that simply the RDC working space, or is it also the working space of the external organisations?
I mean, I think you know, just to say, obviously, Councillor Cortell's given me a little bit of a heads up on some of the questions he wants to ask tonight, and I think for a lot of them, the same answer applies in that what we asked of our ex-architects was a concept study. It was to take a look at the space and the site, you know, identify which parts of the building were real heritage assets and needed to be maintained, preserved and improved upon, which bits would be, you know, potentially be surplus to need and therefore could be used in a different way. It wasn't what's being presented in this report is not going to be what is designed and built. You know, that's what this next phase is all about. This was about looking at what sort of massing is required in order to make it stack up commercially, financially, and economically. And so what I would say is that the items that are in the current report are just that. It's about feasibility. It's what's necessary for this to be feasible in terms of overall thing, you know, the detail aspects of how many parking spaces there be, how many desk spaces there be, the overall massing of the building, how many floors. None of that is determined at this stage, and will be guided by plan policy, pre-application processes with the planners. It will be guided by the inspiration of our architects. You know, who we hope will be inspiring. And so, you know, what we've developed is some key core principles, which is to say that the office space that would be created needs to be flexible, it needs to be open, it needs to be have a real modern approach to the way people work, and we'll be expecting the architects to help lead that design. What we're not in a position at the moment is to say there'll be X many desks, there'll be X many parking spaces. This is exactly what it will look like, because we're just not at that stage yet. That's what the next phase is all about. It's getting to that point where we're ready to construct something.
I was just trying to establish, though, in a broad brush way, what the proportion of parking spaces would be to employees and on the site. And an additional concern is that there will be something between 14 and 26 flats built on the site. Now, that is welcome. But will they have their own parking spaces, or will they have to share the car park with the employees on the site?
They will have the parking requirements as per plan policy, and it will be down to us and the architects to ensure that we can meet the planning committee's expectations in terms of providing sufficient parking both for the flats and for the office space that's to be there. I mean, the one thing I would say is that the current Bexhill Town Centre site, which is what, you know, part of what makes it so appealing, is a highly sustainable site in terms of transport. You know, you have two train stations within walking distance, a number of buses that all come into and out of the town centre that connect you both with Eastbourne and Hastings and the wider area. So not to mention that there's actually you know, for those who do need to drive in, maybe if you live in a more rural area, there are a number of other car parks as you know, within the Bexhill area that are highly underutilized at the moment, and to be honest with you, could do with people using them anyway. So I think in terms of sustainability, you don't get much better than the site that we're at the moment.
I fully support having the development on the existing site. I was just concerned about staff getting soaking wet before they had important meetings, and about if they had to come on their bicycles. And while yes, I am very positive about making climate improvements to the building. I'm just concerned about the well-being of the staff with regards to accessing work. If I could move on, though, I've got a question specifically concerning the environmental assessment. I noticed the environmental assessment has been done for the whole building and the related area, but not for the impact of staff working from home. I mean, they'll presumably be in their individual homes consuming more energy than they would otherwise be consuming. Obviously, there'll be an offset for the reduction in transport environmentally. But I wondered whether these factors could be put into any further calculation concerning the environmental impact of this proposal.
Good luck with answering that one, Ben.
I think the simple answer is that people will be doing that anyway, whether we build a new building or not. I think it's one of those. I think it's one of those aspects that maybe needs to be undertaken as a separate piece of work, not directly related to this project. I think understanding the environmental impact of people working from home fits probably more under the environment strategy rather than it does specifically to this project, because people will be working from home or from the office in the same regard, whether or not we're in the existing building or a new building.
Very well answered, Ben. My last question relates to options A and B. One of them is for 14 flats. The other is for a total of 26 flats. Is that a recommendation you expect us to make this evening?
No, what we will need to do is ensure that the proposal that goes forward is commercially viable. So the one that we've been recommending so far is more geared towards option B, which provides the 14 flats but the greater commercial space, because whilst on a social value perspective, the flats probably add just as much as the office space. In terms of economic and commercial value, unfortunately, Bexhill flats aren't really worth a lot when you compare them to the build cost, and therefore to make this financially viable, actually it's probably going to be more closer towards option B, where you have the greater office space which can generate a revenue income to offset the cost of borrowing, whereas the capital sums released from a rent, a residential sales, or even a residential rent for that matter, are going to be significantly less.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, I can begin where Councillor Cortell left off, because on my reading of paragraph 20 on page 4, effectively, when you say you're going for 13.7 million capital cost and 460,000 revenue costs, that is option B.
Yeah.
Which leads me, I'm hesitant to repeat what I said at Cabinet, but the two reasons why I think in some ways, and I'm reassured to some extent by what Ben has already said about nothing set in stone, but the reason why I think we are moving rather too fast for comfort is twofold. One, I don't dismiss, but I simply note that when you look at the options for how we climate-proof the building, we are told that the best option, had we simply been climate-proofing our present building, is not available yet for short-term reasons. The implication being, if we wait a bit, we may get some better climate change options. But the one which is much more worrying to me is precisely what Ben has just said about the value of office space. There's an assumption there about the post-COVID situation. And I totally agree with the idea that we need to keep the headquarters in the centre of Bexhill. Because if the centre of Bexhill is to flourish at all, then clearly it needs people there. But they won't necessarily all be office workers. And to some extent, we probably need to repopulate our centres with living people who not only work there, but actually live there. That's actually quite good for the climate. It's quite good for the economy. But it does actually suggest to me that we need to keep an open mind on the amount of residential. Leads me to another point. I trust Ben's keeping a note of these because there are some implicit questions. But always we show the car parks as having nothing over them. In other words, we treat them as flat, open spaces. But it's perfectly possible to build over a car park, and it may well be more cost effective to do so. In other words, it seems to me you could have all the office accommodation in option B. If you turn to the visual diagrams on page 57, if I can direct your attention there, it seems to me you still are left with a large car parking space to the northwest, where on option A, a building is shown. If instead of that being every floor residential, the ground floor were parking and open to the rest of the site, so the whole of that flat space was parking, you could probably still put in 2 or 3 or possibly even 4 residential floors. The current building is scheduled for 5 stories, and you will get more residential and more office. So a combination of a more imaginative use of the car parking space might actually produce a rather better solution altogether. I'd certainly like that to be minuted tonight and analysed as part of the ongoing thing, because it does seem to me, and I'm sure Councillor Cortell will agree with me on this, that it would be desirable to increase the amount of residential accommodation if that is feasible. And it seems to me that's perfectly feasible without losing any car parking space. I'll stop there for a moment. I've got some very much more specific questions, but in a way I'd like to hear Ben's reaction to those 2 statements.
In terms of the car park, I mean, you make a very good point, actually. Yeah, I mean, we, like I said, the study that's been presented to you here tonight was the feasibility aspect of that study, just to see what was necessary in terms of, you know, and feasible in terms of, you know, okay, if we put resi here and we put resi here and we put office here, does that wash its own face? Can it all fit on the site? I think as we go into more detailed designs, I'll definitely be talking to our architects, and we'll be going through a proper commissioning process for the architects. We'll be talking to them about how we increase the amount of residential on the site. What we do need to be careful, obviously, is we need to be doing that in consultation with our planning department to make sure that they're comfortable with the level of development that's taking place on the site. So it will always be a compromise between those 2 aspects, but absolutely, I'll be raising that both with the planners and as part of those discussions, and also with our architects to discuss. I'm sorry, I didn't quite pick up what the other point was you wanted me to address, Councillor. If you sort of just give me, because it wasn't a direct question. So
yes, I'm worried that we're making certain assumptions about the post-COVID office future,
yeah.
And well, I sense the desire to get on, quite a lot of this does depend on assumptions about post-COVID, which I don't feel terribly secure myself in making about I'm sure the nature of office space will be much more hot desking. I'm sure that more people will be working from home. But quite what that's going to do to our other users, I'm reasonably clear what it will do to us. But what it will do to East Sussex County Council, Department of Work and Pensions, the voluntary organisations in particular, and we're building quite a lot around that element of the plan with a degree of certainty at the moment, which I don't feel. If I were moving on the specification stage, I would be moving a little more slowly, I think, than the Cabinet is at the moment, until we had more certainty about what a post-COVID office environment is going to look like and whether the voluntary organisations are going to respond in the way we anticipate. But it's a cautionary note, and Ben has already said we're going to take some years over this. But it does seem to me the specification at the moment necessarily is looser than you would normally have when you went to architects.
I mean, you raise some very good points, and there is a certain amount of uncertainty with regards to what people's needs are going to be as and when we return to a post-COVID world. I think what's been really important is that we've established very good relationships with our existing tenants in Amherst Road. So that's East Sussex Healthcare Trust and the DWP. We continue to be talking to them about their office requirements. What we're seeking to do, where possible, is use Amherst Road building as a holding. I was going to say holding cell there, but as a holding position, where if we can populate that building to a point where we've got security of tenancies within there that then can be migrated over to the new building once it's complete, that gives us a lot better certainty. I mean, we are talking to the existing tenants, which includes East Sussex Healthcare Trust, Department for Work and Pensions, and East Sussex County Council, and East Sussex. We're working closely with them through Spaces, which is the Pan East Sussex Public Sector Property Group, on the East Sussex workplace reset program, which covers all of their work environments, and we're talking to them specifically about office requirement into the future. So we are having those conversations, as well as other partners, voluntary sector and other complementary partners. I won't go into too much detail at this stage because it would be unfair on those partners and to sort of out them in public without having given them forewarning. But we are talking to a number of people who would have an interest in a potential tenancy at the building. And you're right, yeah, we have to make a judgment call at the point at which we're ready to make that go no go decision as to whether or not we feel there's certainty, enough certainty that we're going to be able to generate the income to press to press that button. I think the problem is you never really know, no matter what the environment is, you never really know what the take up is going to be until you've got a design and you can have those more sort of committal conversations with the tenants who you're looking to bring on board. So you're right. It is we have to take this step by step, and what we will be doing is, once the design process is over and we're coming to we've got certainty with the planning committee that's an approved design, we're going to be coming back to Cabinet and full council with a full commercial case to say, look, this is how it stacks up, these are the partners who are on board, this is how it's going to be delivered. I'd rather risk, okay, it's not a small amount of money, but it's certainly amount of money now, and to give members certainty that when they make the commitment in 18 months, 24 months time, that they're going to have that certainty that the cost of this is going to be underwritten by an income that's coming in from tenants. Something that I cannot do right now, and I don't think you could ever do at this early stage in the design process.
No, I do take that point. I was going to say there are one or two missing figures. I'm not quite sure what rental we are foregoing on Amherst Road, but it's probably immaterial if you're going to use that as a holding centre and then transfer them into officer accommodation. So I won't press that one.
Although, just to address that, Councillor, that has been included, the loss of the existing current income. So the top floor and on the ground floor has been factored into the loss of that income has been factored into the financial appraisals that have been put forward. So we have the
100,000 foregone, is it?
Yes, so that's the 100,000 foregone it directly relates to, so the revenue loss 105,333 directly relates to the money that was the rental income that will have been lost from the 2 floors of Amherst Road. So that's what that figure represents.
That's useful to know. There are a number of other assumptions, one or two of which worry me. I'm not worried about disregarding value-added tax, although you will have to pay it on those elements like Amherst Road, which are refurbished. But I am more worried that at this stage, we've struck out of our very rough cost-benefit analysis, inflation and fees. Fees particularly, obviously, you will negotiate. But to have no notional sum in terms of your costings worries me slightly. Inflation is more worrying because these costings were done back in the spring of 2020, as I understand, February. Inflation of building costs, I suspect, is going to go on rising. And I was slightly surprised you're getting as good a figure as 2,000 a square metre. We were getting that in 2016. I'm slightly surprised if it's still as low as that.
I mean, we will take in terms of the build cost per square metre. That will be part of that approvals process, and obviously we'll be able to do a greater review when we know the actual design of the building. That's going to come forward. In terms of the professional fees that you mentioned, we have factored those into the financial appraisal. We've accounted for about 10% on all professional fees so that's the architects, your quantity surveyors, so on and so forth, within our financial appraisals that have fed into the outcomes in Appendix C.
Yeah, can I finally go to Appendix C?
Yeah.
There were a number of queries I had. I mean, again, slightly oddly, the figure that you show on option 4 is the higher figure. I don't mind that, but it isn't one that occurred earlier in the document. You have a figure of 3.4 million, which is called capital income. And I wasn't at all clear what that was.
So that's the sales revenue from the...
Can I ask that one first of all?
Sorry, Councillor. Yeah, no, that's the sales revenue from the sale of the Amherst Road flats.
Ah, right.
So because that would be a capital income rather than a revenue base, we've separated it out because obviously it can only be used in certain ways. So it'd be used to offset the overall borrowing against the scheme.
So we're going to use that for those flats for sale. That would strengthen what I was saying about building over the car park, because you will either get rental income out of those or again further capital value of sale, which would offset your capital cost. But yeah, that I do understand now. You're much stronger at the moment, and again, this we'll probably come back to later, to what I would call the cost side than the income side. Now, that's obviously a slight problem for this meeting because I suspect your assumptions there are commercially sensitive. But I think at some stage, Scrutiny will want to know much more about how you got to those figures. because you end up with a reasonably optimistic net income. That obviously is reassuring, but we do need to understand how you got there, I think, because I am worried that the capital cost is probably going to go up by the time we actually negotiate our PWLB loan. I can't see it staying quite as low as it is at the moment. And that could throw that figure considerably on the cost side. So understanding the robustness of the income side is going to be important. I'll leave it there.
Fair point, thank you. I mean, what I would just say in response to your last comment there, Councillor, is you're right. I mean, we have tried to be as conservative as we can in terms of our approach to both the potential income and the sort of the liability that we'd face if we don't get the income that we're expecting, and particular sensitivity with regards to the borrowing cost. But again, all of those things I think will be part of the review process that we go through as we bring this forward, probably through scrutiny and cabinet up to council before we go to out to a sort of an award of a tender or fixed budget or anything like that, once the design process and the planning process is undertaken.
Okay, thank you. Now I've got a number of councillors who have indicated, so I'll go to Councillor Mrs Earl Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Barnes has covered a little bit of what I was going to ask, but I just wanted to go to page 101 of talking about the, sorry, my phone's ringing. Talking about the heating system and looking to go, obviously, towards an ecosystem, and it gives the various options, but no real cost comparisons. And if it is so much cheaper to go down this route, I just can't help wondering why, in that case, the Delaware Pavilion decided against going down that route because of the cost. So if it is cheaper, why did they not go down that route? And secondly, I understand from my neighbour, who's a heating engineer, that most of these ecosystems, in fact, cost a great deal more to run. They're very expensive to install, and once installed, they're not nearly as efficient as current systems, and in fact, cost a great deal more. So I just wondered if you could give me some understanding of where we're coming from on that. Thank you.
I mean, I'll address the Delaware point. I think first of all, I think that you're right. I mean, the obviously the better the system, the more expensive it is to install, and I think the decision that will be made at the time of pulling together our employers' requirements in terms of how we approach the energy saving and options and things like that will be based upon a cost benefit analysis at the time, and say, okay, well, how much do these systems currently cost to install versus how much is it going to save, both in terms of money, in terms of carbon offset, that sort of thing. What and look at the benefits in that way. The Delaware doesn't have the luxury of being able to flexibly borrow in the same way that we do. So they, I think, were more constrained by the amount of money that they had to spend on the system available, rather than necessarily focused on how much it could save them in the longer term. In terms of the report, this might be an opportunity to bring in Cheryl, just to sort of go through what was asked of in terms of the sustainability report and the way it was focused on. Cheryl, are you able to add some more into this with regards to the energy saving side of it?
Yes, that's fine. Evening, councillors. Nice to see you all. When we appointed our ex-architects to look at the concept feasibility, we also asked them, obviously, to look at the current situation with the town hall in terms of carbon impact, and I would say energy efficiency, but probably energy inefficiency is a better term to use. So they did an awful lot of work. It started off with me going around and taking some photos, actually, of the hideous heating systems, looking into the existing boilers, the pipeworks, the radiators, the lowered ceilings, the electric lights, just everything really, giving them all the information and gathering that from facilities. And then they did the analysis. They commissioned Harley Haddo to do the sustainability analysis, to look at how the town hall currently performs, which is pretty poorly, I think, as we all know. And some years ago, and in a previous life at Rother, I was responsible for the utility bills, and they were quite hideous back then. And I don't suppose they've got any better. So really what we did is we asked them to look at, because obviously we want to retain as much of the original kind of town hall as possible. So there's an we have to accept that, we can do retrofit type stuff to the town hall building. So it was really looking at those categories, what we could do to just save energy, that kind of lean, how we could culture change internally in the way we use and operate things. Then looking at some more what they call mean, I suppose, issues to address, which would be replacing a lot of the mechanical electrical engineering as described by Ben. And then looking at, actually replacing the roof, including PV panels. And really it was just looking at all the different, how we could save the energy in that current core building. This is, I must just stress that this Harley-Haddo report is really about that core building of the town hall. It's not looking at Amherst Road, and it's not looking at any proposed new extension, because as Ben has highlighted, this is concept feasibility, and there actually isn't a building for them to analyse just yet with the level of information. So yes, they went through all the options, looked at its current performance, and we really did stress that this is about how we can obviously save energy and save carbon, because as Ben said, a lot of the I suppose where this project came from is, what are we going to do about the town hall with our climate change emergency declared? This is our core operational building, and we potentially need to lead by example. So that's where the report came from. That was the brief that we gave them. What can we do as a bare minimum in all different stages? And if we added those all together, and that then would sit alongside an internal, I suppose, a sympathetic internal refurbishment to create better working spaces. I know when I first moved into the town hall from Beeching Road, I got lost several times and had to ask to be redirected back out of all the corridors. A lot of wasted space and a lot of wasted heat and light in corridors as well. So it's really looking at how the energy can be improved alongside, that brief that we'll give to any appointed future architect of looking at the refurbishment to complement that, to make that building operate much better for both the people that work in it, the people that visit it, and of course, ultimately the added value of reducing our carbon footprint as a council.
So are we saying we don't have any idea of cost?
We do have some of the options that are presented in that report.
Yes, they had to. Well, perhaps I missed it, but I couldn't find any costings there. Just the options.
Oh, right. OK. There were some costings listed there. The version that I had, I don't know if that's the version that's been printed. I don't know whether that was redacted or not, but I'll just check that for you, and I'll let you know that. But really, we're looking. Yeah, that's fine. When we're looking at, probably about £250,000 for what you would call the mean, over and above the compliance work that obviously has already been done by our building maintenance. So we're looking at, an extra 300,000 for, health and safety work, replacing the boiler, the pumps, the pipe work, hot water storage, all of the lighting with the energy efficiency fittings and all the appropriate controls. Then when you get through to, the mean stuff, roof replacement, would be fairly significant on that building. We've actually had a what I would call a slightly low cost estimate of about 55,000, but I personally think the roof on the town hall would possibly come in at a bit more than that, given the nature of the roof. Replacing all the glazing to achieve the correct U values would be around the £70,000 to £100,000 mark. Solar panels, 65,000, air source heat pumps up to 100,000. So we're starting to really build up quite a lot of cost to be able to achieve that lean green mean within just the main town hall. And
That
so
sounds like to me it's going to be a small fortune, in other words.
but that's yeah, I think, as Ben said, that's why we're looking at the options for the whole site to be able to generate that income to offset the costs of the things that we're probably going to need to address at some point in the future anyway. But Ben, maybe you'd like to come back in. Thanks, Councillor Williams.
There's a on page 99 and 100. There's a sort of an idea of costs there. I think it's also worth saying that Deirdre mentioned the De La Wall. Well, the De La Wall is grade 2 listed and built of concrete, and I would probably say that sort of your new, if you like, eco-friendly heating systems just wouldn't be man enough to heat the place. You know, just sort of our air source and ground source heat pumps. They need a efficient building to start with. So it stands a chance because it operates at a lesser temperature than a standard central heating boiler. Central heating boiler runs at sort of probably 65 degrees, and a air source heat pump or something runs at probably about 45 degrees. So therefore, you've got colder water flowing around. You need a more efficient building to start with. So if you've got an old listed building, you can't do a lot with it, I'm afraid. So that is the idea of refurbishing or building new. Where's my bit of paper? Councillor Errington.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Barnes has covered quite a lot of my questions regarding the potential tenants, because I expect they, like us, are looking at perhaps reducing their own requirements. So I imagine we've been talking to them throughout the pandemic so that we know what to expect. Just very small points, kind of things that concern me is that, for example, the Sussex Hotel in London Road, we agreed to that be converted to residential and some office accommodation, which I see last week is actually happening. And I kind of, something in the back of my mind thinking is that perhaps as more shops become offices as a result of the pandemic, that, you know, we're not going to be able to move quick enough. It's just an observation. The other thing is High Weald House. I know that's not ours, but there's not many takers for that, and I'm just hoping that perhaps the town hall location is more attractive because it's so, as you say, central to shops and transport. But I just wanted to highlight the fact, you know, we've got a new office. There is a new office complex, but not very high take up in terms of tenants. So those are just observations and things that make me a little bit cautious. The other thing, slightly more fluffy, but again, it could get quite expensive. Under the exclusions on page 35, the loose furniture and fittings. Obviously, that would be things like desks, filing cabinets, chairs, etc., etc. Would we be buying those for our tenants as well as rather staff, or are we just going to offer people a shell?
Yeah, so we'll be in terms of that. The sort of traditional approach is we offer a service shell. I think we will be looking at the way in which we charge as part of that, because I think the vision is to have a sort of particularly on the ground floor sort of open access area which any of the tenants can use and share. And so it's a point taken. Yeah, we haven't factored that in because we don't know how much of the building at this stage that we would be required to furnish. If we were to furnish it on behalf of our tenants, then that would surely reflect in their rent. So but traditionally speaking, no, you just rent a square footage of space and say, okay, this is my 700 square meters, thank you ever so much. We'll do with it as we will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Horton, did you indicate? Is he still there? Councillor Horton?
No, I don't want to say anything.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll make some general points, really. You certainly, I think Ben was correct. And the thing we all should be agreeing is that to do nothing is not an option. You can't carry on with an inefficient electrical and boiler system that's costing a fortune. Very often, local government long-term savings take time, but you have to invest to achieve that. So we do need, if we're going to make that building efficient, to invest and have an efficient system. One of the things that does worry me, I mean, it's a step-by-step process, and this phrase of being cost efficient or nil cost at the end of the project, that makes me a little bit nervous, because when you look at the Amherst Road development, now surely we should be trying to maximise income on that site, but also balance that against having an appropriate site with residential housing, which will provide homes for people in Bexhill. So there could be quite a difference in the figures on that, and it would be very easy to just mass develop that and have the maximum number of flats, thinking you'll get more money that way. But also, yeah, with more people working at home and more office space being developed, is there really a market for a lot of office space in a year, 2-3 years time down the road? Just general points, really. Thank you.
Any answers to that, Ben? Or
no, I mean, Councillor Clark makes a good point, particularly with regards to the Amherst Road building in its current form. And, you know, there is an argument to say that we could leave it as is. I suppose my only concern with that is that how long will that be considered an acceptable sort of office environment? I mean, you know, we all know that the current sort of, you know, rat run that is the, or not rat run, but, you know, sort of rabbit run, isn't it? That is the current main town hall building. You know, it doesn't really create and foster a cooperative working environment in terms of an office space. And I'll just wonder how long will Amherst Road fit that bill going into the future in itself. I think it's sort of 35-40 years old now. It's quite a dark environment, and will probably need some significant refurbishment if it's to continue to serve as a rentable space long into the future. So, I mean, again, things that we haven't, you know, wider costs that we haven't considered that would need to be incorporated into a long-term view of the site, regardless of whether we redevelop it or not.
okay, thank you. Councillor Madeley.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I approve of the overall concept of the development or redevelopment, I am really concerned that the timing is wrong. Councillor Barnes has already mentioned this with the COVID situation. I just feel that apart from what needs to be done to the main building itself, I do feel that anything else at the moment is a little bit ahead of things. But I do have one question. Do all future decisions come back to overview and scrutiny before going forward to Cabinet and full council, please? Thank you.
I would think so, but Ben can confirm.
Well, I mean, what we'll be looking to, in terms of next steps, what we'll be looking to do is obviously commission the architects and bring forward a planning application. So actually, the next committee to make any sort of decision on this project will probably be the planning committee. Following that, we will then seek to bring it back through the governance process before launching into a final project. So at the point at which we get planning, we will then be able to give greater certainty of costs and potential tenancies to members. And absolutely, I think I'm quite happy to sort of commit at this stage that we bring that back to overview and scrutiny first for a proper and thorough review before it goes on to cabinet for a decision, and then for cabinet to a recommendation up to council for a final decision on a budget to drive it forward. So, you know, yes, in answer is that we will bring this back to overview and scrutiny before we take it to cabinet and then full council at the point at which we've received planning permission.
Thank you.
one thing I've been thinking, and it came up in this report, pre-application advice, and it made me sort of smile a little bit, because at the moment we can't get pre-application advice, or the man on the road can't get pre-application advice, and I thought, that's probably because we know a man who can do it.
I wouldn't like to say we receive preferable treatment, because we certainly don't, and especially not from planners. But yeah, I mean, I think given the sensitivity of this site, given the heritage aspects of this site, and the major nature of the development, planning have committed to giving us full support in the pre-application process to ensure that we bring forward a design that's acceptable in planning terms, and as well as design terms, and something that the planning committee will hopefully feel confident in approving when we get to that stage.
Yeah, it's a real awkward one, isn't it? To some degree, because the planning department, they've got to look at it through their legal planning minds, but try and take out of it the fact that they will end up working in it, and their current place will get knocked down on whatever they say. So that is, yeah. I'm not a planner, so that's just as well. Councillor Maynard.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and can I thank Ben, obviously, and Cheryl for the information and the help that they've given members in terms of additional information that's, I think, been very well received by members today. But I ought to start by redeclaring my personal interest as a sitting member of East Sussex County Council, one seeking re-election, and also further caveat that by saying I shall try and deliberately avoid making any political points. We've already made those political points. We've already had a vote, and that's very important for anybody watching this meeting. We've already had a vote, obviously, of members, and we're very clear as to the differences between members' opinions on how this project should or should not progress. But as I say, I choose my words carefully, because I will stick to what I've said in terms of the fact that I don't believe this evening it is appropriate or right to make political comments. What I do want to do, though, is just clarify a few issues, and chiefly around the fact that from what we've heard thus far, it does appear that this project is ideologically driven, from the comments that Cheryl Poole made. And that's something I think I find particularly disturbing, because as a local authority, the one thing we must do above all else is make sure that we take financially responsible decisions, that we assess risk extremely carefully before making any sort of investment. And quite clearly, we've seen from what's happened as a matter of fact in neighbouring authorities very recently in looking at their budgets, that you can very quickly get yourself into hot water if you don't make very sensible and prudent financial decisions. But the other comment that I wanted to make is that anybody watching this meeting would think that we hadn't invested in the town hall in the past. And the fact remains that we have gone above and beyond the normal repairs and replacements in the past. And I believe, in fact, we have, in fact, carried out significant repairs to the roof of the town hall, certainly during my tenure as district councillor. And furthermore, they might not be triple glazed, but I believe we replaced all the windows in the town hall only a few years ago. And the point I want to make, and this is taking it down to a very basic level, I know, but it is a significant and worthwhile point to make. If you owned a house and you had invested over the years in various repairs and replacements, even if you had a very strong green, if you like, agenda within your mind, if you'd replaced the windows in your property and the heating system in 2012, you wouldn't take a wrecking ball to it in 2021, would you? Would you? I don't think so. And I think that the fact of the matter remains is that we have invested over the years in the town hall. I think quite clearly to do nothing isn't an option, but the plain fact remains that a very pragmatic, sensible and low risk approach is the one I think that we should take. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much. I'd like to commend this report and the hope to keep the work of Rother District Council and hopefully other agencies and partners into the centre of town, where accessibility by train, bus and some lovely new cycle routes is available for officers and their staff members, but more importantly for residents who may need to visit the town hall for essential help and advice. And furthermore, this will benefit the local economy for shopping locally, eating locally and supporting locally. But I do wonder currently, how accessible are the offices at the town hall? For example, how easy is it for someone with sight or mobility issues to transfer from office to office? And how clumsy the adaptations to providing such improvements would look and be managed. So I would like to ask, please, will hearing loops be fitted throughout the building? Will there be visual aids for the visually impaired to help them move along the corridors safely, to help not just staff and our officers and members, but visitors as well? In our report on page 5 under equalities and diversities, it says equalities impact assessments will be carried out as a part of this project to understand how the building needs to accommodate the needs of all users. So I'm just seeking assurance that, you know, when we talk about accessibility, we tend to forget that people with hearing difficulties and with sight impairments find it just as difficult as do others. Thank you.
I would assume, Ben, that would all be done under sort of the building regs and DDA, wouldn't it?
It will. I mean, I think things like hearing loops and stuff, particularly in the non-public areas, aren't sort of standard. But we can absolutely look at the value of adding those. It's not a problem at all. I mean, we we can. What the sort of initial approach is obviously, to cover off, I suppose, the point that Councillor Cook has made, and also the point that Councillor Maynard made previously, is try not to recognise the work that's already been done in the town hall, and not sort of dismiss that in a sense, and for anybody who's been into the town hall over the last 9 months will see the work that's happened in the reception area, and I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that would be work at waste, because actually that will still be our primary reception area for residents and businesses and any members of the public to come into. So, but you're right. I mean, I suppose what we're talking about there in terms of that is the ability to move around the non-public areas of the town hall, and those will absolutely be fundamental to the way we design the building, and yeah, will be part of how that complies with building regulations and DDA compliance.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Mooney.
Thank you very much, Chairman. In the context of cost neutral and budget implications, I'd like an explanation of what's at Appendix C, option costs, because I'm not too sure how I should read it. If you look at, that's page 13, sorry, page 13, Appendix C, and maybe somebody might explain to me what exactly it is. Is it an alternative to cost neutral? Is it a thing that's going to affect the budget from year to year for the next 50 years? Are we going to be borrowing for the next 50 years on it, and the implications of interest, etc., etc.? What does it mean?
I'll let you do that one, Ben.
No worries. Thanks ever so much. Okay, so options 1, 2, 3, and 4 relate to options 1, 2, 3, and 4 as in Appendix B. In terms of the capital cost, that's how much that overall cost it's going to deliver. How much it's going to cost to deliver that work that's as described in Appendix B. Capital income is just that, so it's the sale of in the case of option 4, the residential. What we've done is it's called the annualized revenue spend. So in effect, what we've done is we've written down the cost of the capital money over a period of years. Now that could reflect a cost of borrowing, or in the case of option one, you know, we've assumed probably, you know, no borrowing, you know, and just sort of,
Okay.
you know, you can just revenue it across a period of years. So it's about, and then the number of years that it's written down over is in that final column. So the annualized revenue spend is how much it's going to cost the council on an annual basis over a period of years. The revenue loss is how much money will we lose as a result of undertaking that. So in option 4, we will lose the income from floors, the ground floor and the top floor of Amherst Road. The income or savings potential, now that's what we've judged on a relatively conservative basis to suggest that this is what we think that it could, by taking this action, it will either save or generate income, or a combination of both. And then obviously what the revenue impact is that final income versus income savings minus how much it was going to cost to do it, and then the number of years at the end. So it's sort of a progressive sort of approach to detail exactly how we envisage that costing. All of this is stemmed from a much more detailed discounted cash flow that we undertake for every project that we do, every acquisition that we make. We have a standard pro forma which we use that details all of the costs involved, all of the incomes involved, and then discounts that across a period of years that we determine to be appropriate for the scheme. The capitalisation period in terms of years is obviously dependent on how big the scheme is. And, you know, the biggest scheme, you will have to write down over a bigger number of years, but you'll get a greater benefit out of it.
But so the other part of my question was, will there be a constant balance, if you like, outstanding in terms of cost, or if we take option 1, for instance, which looks in terms of the schedule probably the best option, there'll be little or nothing left as residual cost over the years. We shall have worked it all off in the redevelopments and the sell-offs, etc., etc.
So option 1 is a very light touch approach just to meet our statutory compliance. So that's 350 grand. You know, that's that. And we to be honest with you, we probably wouldn't need to write that down over any period of time. It just comes straight out of reserves if we were to undertake that work. So I mean, I'm not unaware that I'm talking to an accountant here, so I'm you know, so but basically, yeah, it's how much it costs to do that piece of work. These are not comparative options, they are the costs reflected in the different options that are available.
Okay, yeah, all right, yeah, okay, agreed.
Okay,
good. Councillor Drayson, Chairman of Council.
Sorry, I think Councillor Lang was before me, Chair.
Oh, actually, I haven't. No. Let's have a look. Oh, there's a Langlands. Yeah. Yep. Sorry, Councillor Langlands. I missed you there. Go, Councillor Langlands in.
Quickly say.
No worries, no worries. That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for letting me talk. Yes, I did see on page 99 that it said, and probably Ben, I might need your bit of help with this, that the recommendation is to do a detailed survey and review of the retrofit options at the next feasibility stage. I mean, if that is the case, I'm concerned that it's at the next feasibility stage. Would it not be a good idea to do that before you get to that stage? Because you're looking at sort of 450,000 to do the obviously consulting and planning and everything for the actual complete change of the town hall. Would it not be advisable to do some sort of study of these retrofit options to see what would any of those work, particularly at this time when we're coming out of COVID and people may see us as being looking after ourselves rather than looking after them. It's just a point, you know, that I'd like to make. And the thing is, option 8 does seem to be quite impressive in the sense that it is a 67% reduction in carbon, which is quite a lot, and a 77% reduction in energy use. So, I mean, I don't know. My feeling is that, like Councillor Madeley, is timing right, and is there something we can do that could work at this stage and get our town hall far more efficient and give us time to see whether office space is required and things like that?
Yes, I mean the answer is that the option 8, as is listed in the environmental sustainable report, is the basis for the costs in. Now there's going to be lots of cross-referencing of options here, but option 2 in Appendix C and B. So that the cost of that work plus the statutory compliance work in against option 1 equates to about 800,000, which is the 826,250 there, and you know that generates an annual saving, because you know that's an improvement on the efficiency of the building. It's not a vast improvement on the efficiency of the building, but it does make it has enough of an impact to make a reduction on the costs of heating those buildings. And so that has been considered as an option and is reflected in the options appraisal under option 2 in Appendix B and Appendix C.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Drayson, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Small point, following on from Councillor Cook and Ben's reply. I noticed in the architects about the existing building, they talk about level access through the building is currently not available, and some modification might be anticipated where it doesn't interfere with the historical valued areas. We've got to do everything we possibly can to make it accessible. We need a passenger lift in there. I don't think any toilet in that building has a flat access. Thank you.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Sorry.
Can't argue with those points.
Can't argue with that, Ben. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ben and Cheryl, for giving such detailed answers to all our questions. Firstly, I wanted to say how much I support this. I think the timing is right now. We have declared a climate emergency, and we do need to crack on. We need to put our own house in order, and we know that this has a massive carbon footprint. However much money we put into it, it will never be anywhere near carbon neutral, and I think this is the best possible option. But what I wanted to say was I was dismayed by Councillor Barnes's proposal to build over the car park. My hope was that the car park could be also planted with a few trees and shrubs. I think for the people in the surrounding offices on 3 sides would much prefer to look out onto a little bit of greenery rather than another office building. So if it's at all possible, I would like to have a bit of green space out the back as well as at the front. And thank you for all your good work on this.
I should think anything like that would be picked up at a planning stage, would it not?
Yeah.
Councillor Barnes, you've indicated you wish to come back.
I think it's the other one, if you don't mind, a non-member of the committee. I'd just like to ask a little bit about the disruption caused by, obviously, the demolition of the buildings that aren't going to be needed. But that also leads me to wonder what sort of timing for each section. Where will you start and what will you do last? But really, it's the sheer amount of noise that's going to go on, as far as I can see, pretty well all the way around the town hall while all this is going on. And if it's going on for many years, how are you going to cope with running committee meetings and also just talking to the public? They will require a little bit of peace and quiet, but it does sound to me quite a noisy, because it's such a huge project. I just wondered how you're going to manage it's the side effect of those people who have to work there while it's all going on.
It's probably called a Teams meeting, isn't it?
it's a valid point, and we've included within the overall costs as part of the appraisal a budget for 2 years away, 2 years to relocate the staff, if you like, away from the office space in order to facilitate the redevelopment. So we've accounted for that potential cost. So it's envisaged that the general staff are not going to be on site during that construction period. In terms of how exactly it's phased at the moment, we're sort of just looking at a 2-phase project. Phase 1 being the whole of the town hall, including the reconstruction, and then phase 2 being the Amherst Road building as a conversion, because obviously we would like to keep tenants in there until such a time as it's able to we're able to move them over to the new building. I think in terms of committee meetings and such, yeah, I mean, we've had some very early discussions with Lisa about how we would facilitate that. Obviously, we've got plenty of time before a digger moves in or a bulldozer moves in, to make sure that we come up with a solution that's suitable for and acceptable for both members and the public, to ensure that we're still able to have these debates in a public forum, whatever the government decides that public forum needs to look like going into the future.
Thank you. Councillor Errington.
Hi, sorry, just a very quick query again on the option costs on page 13. Apologies, Ben, if you've already mentioned this. The capital income, the 3.4 million, is that purely the 14 flats?
Yes, that's the sale of the 14, the entirety of that building.
Okay, it's just that averages out at 243,000. I mean, are they going to be? That means that some are going to be less, obviously, and some are going to be a lot more. But bearing in mind, I had a quick look this morning, and there are 185 flats for sale in Bexhill's town alone. Are they going to be quite sort of high end, because they're not going to have presumably much outside space, and they're not going to have the views that, say, seafront flats have? I just wonder whether that's a bit of a optimistic, or is that looking to the future, really, that number?
I mean, like you say, it may well be overly optimistic. The size of the building means that there's a number of 3-bedroom flats in there, which obviously are
very attractive,
which are much more attractive in terms of cost, more so than your 1-beds, which attract a relatively low value. I mean, we also have to factor in the fact that there will be a proportion of those which will be affordable as well, to in terms of policy compliance. It's part of the overall assessment that we've put a number on at the moment, but we will need to review as we go forward, and when we create the full commercial business case before coming back through scrutiny and up to cabinet and up to council, once we've received planning permission. If we receive planning permission, then we will be able to give much greater certainty as to A, the cost of the development, and B, how much we think is likely to be generated through the sale.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Barnes, you wish to come back?
Just to say to Councillor Gray, that the offices, as I understand it, will have, I'm looking at page 57, I believe there are other diagrams which make it more clear, but the offices will have a green space in the middle of that particular complex. Where I'm suggesting we roof over is the car park complex, which would otherwise be entirely tarmac. So the other major thing, which is a good thing about this in terms of green, is the plaza in front of the town hall, which I think we all actually should applaud.
That's a East Sussex County Council project, which has been part funded through Local Growth Fund and through SIL, and is currently out, or at least will be out to consultation soon after the elections.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes.
Councillor Cortell.
Thank you, Chair. Just to get back on my earlier question to Ben about the proportion of spaces between the number of people in offices at any one time and the number of parking spaces. I'm concerned that the next stage in terms of public scrutiny is going to be planning. I mean, surely we can have some idea between now and planning of what the concept is in terms of the proportion between available desks and available parking spaces. By the time it gets to planning, it'll be a yes or no answer, and a lot of work will have gone into that.
I mean, I think parking and density is only one part of those considerations that planning will take on board. I mean, the amount of parking is dictated through plan policy as a percentage of as a proportion of the square footage that we're looking to develop. So it's already written in plan policy, and it will be advised upon by the local transport authority, which is East Sussex County Council, as part of their statutory function in responding to these. So, I mean, in my my consideration, if this were any other development that wasn't one owned by the council, then planning committee would be entrusted to make the decision on the basis of the correct proportion of parking, and I think it's probably still the right environment, unless I'm told otherwise by members, for that consideration to happen.
Thank you.
I think it's worth mentioning, in Brighton, I understand that there's certain developments in the centre of Brighton where they do not provide any parking spaces at all. And if you're a resident in one of these places, you are unable to buy a residence parking permit for streets or Brighton car parks. And the idea is that if you buy one of these places, you don't have a motor vehicle. That is basically it. So it's legs or bike or bus, but not a personal car. So there it is. Now we've got Councillor Courtney.
With respect, Chair, Brighton is a much larger urban area with good public transport, and a semi-rural area like ours cannot reasonably expect to achieve that level of transport.
No, I'm not making that. I'm just saying that's Brighton. Now then, we've got a recommendation here, resolved that one, the report and the decisions of full council and cabinet be noted. So then they proceed. And any actions be recommended to cabinet as necessary from this meeting, of which as yet I can't see there's anything fundamentally different, to be honest. Now, it has been mentioned by Ben that as this proceeds, it will come back via this committee. Do you wish to have I don't want to describe it as a working group, and equally I don't want the whole process to be run by committee. Ben would probably pull his hair out and probably throw something at me. But would there be benefit in an oversight group? Ben, what thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to either that or to if overview and scrutiny would prefer for us for Cheryl and I to come back in a number of months, and we fit it into the work programme of the main committee to give an update on the progress that we're in, and where we are in terms of the design works when we're looking to have a planning application, the process that we're looking to undertake, and we may have greater clarity over the sort of overall size of the building we're looking at following the pre-app discussions, maybe towards the end of this year or early in 2022, part of the overview and put it on the list for the overview and scrutiny work programme, just an update from myself and Cheryl, and that way all members have the opportunity to feed in prior to it going to a full submission at planning.
Yeah, Chairman, I would be very happy with that. I would be very happy with that.
Could I just hope that some of the suggestions that we've been voicing are carried forward as part of our decision making, not so much as recommendations, but requests that the people doing the work on this bear in mind those suggestions. If we can get additional residential accommodation in particular, I think we should. The other thing is I would support, as Councillor Mooney has, the idea of a report back to us rather than a working party, just telling us how far progress has got and how things are hardening up.
Yeah, I've invited two cabinet members here, Councillor Bayliss and Councillor Dixon. Councillor Bayliss, anything you wish to add? Be careful what you say because you're up for election. So.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll try and avoid Councillor Maynard saying I'm not going to make a political statement and then making one. But yes, I would like to just urge members of the committee. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. I mean, right the way through, obviously, I've been involved in this some months back, and some of the questions coming through, I mean, are things that I've challenged Ben on myself previously, but there's some new things come forward today, and I'm sure as Ben takes forward the work and we work, the cabinet works together with Ben on this, we will make sure that those points are taken forward. From a regeneration perspective, from an economic development perspective, I'd just like to say that I think this is perhaps an ideal project to be taking forward as we come out of the COVID crisis. This will enable us to start regeneration of London Road. It will help us put people into jobs and in the construction industry. I think we've already said it's probably a 2-year project. That will be a number of jobs for hopefully local people in Bexhill. It provides a brilliant opportunity to improve the way we deliver services with our partners. I see opportunities for a sort of one-stop shop approach. It provides sustainability for the town centre. If we keep over 200 jobs in the town centre, I'm sure there'll be people who are running businesses watching this evening who will appreciate that we won't be taking 200 jobs out of the town centre. It gives us 14 new homes for sale or possibly for rental. And for me, the most important thing is it actually puts £87,000 back into the kitty every year, money that can be spent on service improvement or actually reducing council tax. So it is a commercially and financially viable project. It's the sort of thing that we have been doing since we took office in 2019 and before. So far from being ideologically driven project, it's driven by wanting to achieve our objectives around the environment. It's driven by wanting to improve services for residents and getting value for money for your council tax pound, and it's driven by a commitment to our staff. And as I say, I hope overview and scrutiny this evening will resolve to as set out on the paper. We will take forward, I know, working with Ben, the comments that have been made, and we will come back to overview and scrutiny at regular stages to report on progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. You'll be pleased to know I'm not up for election. Once in every 4 years is quite enough for me. Firstly, I'd like to go right back to the beginning with what Ben said and do apologise to councillors. I think that we've all learned a bit on the processes of things through this. Cabinet had a very detailed presentation on this before it came to Cabinet, and what we didn't realise is what the Cabinet papers probably didn't give the flavour and the information that we'd already had verbally. So I think if we'd have got that right, and if Cabinet had noted that, we might not be here today. But we are where we are, and they're all learning things. I see this very much as improving our staff's working conditions. We promote Bexhill as a great place to come and live and work, but what we don't tell you, if you come to work for Rother, you have to work in a rabbit hutch, and that's not good enough. A very hot rabbit hutch a lot of the time. Carbon reduction is important, but it is not at any cost. It's a very good byproduct, really, of this scheme. But we're not spending money just to do that. We are spending money to improve a lot of things. Now, the finance side of it, you'll see Appendix C. It's quite a basic report, but you'll see that on the basis of these figures, it does stack up. I do appreciate that a lot of councillors will not want to capitalise this over 50 years. 50 years is another couple of generations, really, who will be paying this. Now, you can look at that, we could be leaving a debt of that amount, or you could look at it that we're actually leaving them an income of £87,000 a year for 50 years. So we've still got options. If we wanted to reduce that term and not pay ourselves any income, we could reduce that to around 35 years. So there are options, and a lot of councillors have mentioned timing, and I think that is a very, very valid point. But and no disrespect to officers here, local government does tend to work at a rather slower rate than a lot of businesses. And I think by the time we get to where we want to be, time will have passed, and we will know a lot of the answers to the questions that a lot of you have asked today about business space, about whether we're going to need the business space, and about how many of our staff are going to work from home and not work from home. So I think this is an ongoing journey. We'll get there, and we will know a lot of the answers as we go. And I think it's been a really interesting discussion today. Just another thing on the finance. I mean, I do know, and I don't think I'm breaking any confidences, that this has all been worked out on a borrowing rate higher than what we can get if we did this tomorrow. So there is a bit of leeway already built into this, that we're not expecting to borrow this money tomorrow. We could have a rate rise before then. But of course, the PWLB isn't the only source of funds. Robin assures me there are people out there who we can borrow from as well, as good as, maybe even better than the PWLB. And just one other part about the borrowing, and I'm sure you all know this, that the minute we borrow the money, if we do borrow it from the PWLB, is that the rate that we borrow on that day is the rate that we pay for the rest of the loan. So we're not suffering, we're not leaving future councillors higher rates to pay at a future date. We are only going to be paying the rate that we get on the date of borrowing. So that is an important thing to understand. We're not on a variable interest rate. So I do appreciate the chance to have a say, Chairman. Thank you very much, and it's been a very, very useful meeting tonight.
Thank you very much. I think the only thing that ever concerns me when you talk about new town halls is remembering Northampton County Council who got themselves a fancy new hall. Then they did new buildings and offices. Then they did some sort of crazy sell it and lease it back, and then they went bankrupt. So we don't want to be going down that route. And then they disappeared and got split into two anyway, and it all just went wrong. So Lisa, you have to advise me on this one. Do I need we got these officer recommendations? Is that the ones I take? Report and discussion of full council and cabinet be noted, and any actions be recommended to cabinet as necessary. And as it's been said, it comes back to us later.
Sorry, you haven't made any sort of firm recommendations, and you're noting the report, and all the other points have been noted by officers present. So I think unless members want to do a recorded vote, I'm not sure there's actually any necessity.
That's what I was wondering. What I was wondering.
If everyone's happy.
Yep, I'm getting nods. Am I getting sufficient nods? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the nods I can see are sufficient. Well, that's it then. Sorry that we've had to spend a couple of hours on this, but but as Ben and Kevin said, we could have avoided it with a bit of extra information, but I think it's been useful. So that being that, I declare this meeting closed at 14 minutes past 8. Thank you very much for your attendance.